I have cameras today in Texas that are showing humongous groups of dozens or hundreds of migrants walking right into the country. So I'm curious what you meant last week when you said the border is closed.
What I meant is precisely that. The border is closed. We are expelling single adults and families under the Title 42 authority that rests with the Center for Disease Control. And we decided as an administration, furtherance of the president's direction, to administer our immigration laws of this country in an orderly and safe and humane way, that we will not expel unaccompanied children.
Secretary Granholm, can you give us a sense of the timeline on the Jones Act waiver that we just heard from the DOT about, and when will it go into effect?
Actually, this is the Jones Act waiver guy.
Yeah. So if I may, when we receive a request for a waiver, the Department of Transportation engages in an analysis to determine whether any U.S. flagged vessels are available to deliver what is needed, and to be responsive with the urgency that the situation would require. So we are on it as fast as possible.
Is there a timeline, Secretary? I know you're conducting a review, but what is the timeline?
So we're going to move in lightning speed.
Matt Visor.
Can you tell us what is the feasibility of using rail cars to transport fuel into the affected areas? I know that's being looked at.
Yeah, the DOT is looking at that, and so we'll have to wait till their analysis is done. These are not easy solutions, because there may or may not be the right rail cars. There may not or may not be the deep water ports available for the Jones Act to be able to respond. So this particular area of the country, this is why we have doubled down on ensuring that there's an ability to truck oil in, gas in. But the pipe is the best way to go, and so that's why hopefully this company, Colonial, will in fact be able to restore operations by.
Have been here before. I will skip their introductions, but I do want to note that Deputy Secretary Turk was previously the Deputy Executive Director of the International Energy Agency during the Obama-Biden administration. He coordinated international technology and clean energy efforts at DOE and served as Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director at the National Security Council. They obviously have a lot on their plates today, but have agreed to stay for a few questions. With that, I will turn it over to Secretary Granholm.
Thank you. Great, thanks, Jen. The White House and the Department of Energy have been leading an interagency response to the Colonial Pipeline hack, and fortunately, the interagency response is bringing a lot of expertise and resources and authorities from across the federal government. We've been working around the clock since Friday to help Colonial, Friday night when we learned, of course, to help Colonial return the pipeline to normal operation as quickly and as safely and as securely as possible. I would note that last night, one of Colonial's major lines resumed operation under manual control, while the existing inventory is available, along with some of the smaller lines that are spurs off of the major lines. They are getting those up and running. Many of you are aware that Colonial announced yesterday that they fully expect to substantially restore operations by the end of this week. Now, I've had several conversations with the CEO of Colonial, and who has indicated that by close of business tomorrow, Colonial will be in a position to make the full restart decision. But even after that decision is made, it will take a few days to ramp up operations. This pipeline has never been shut down before. It travels great distances. There is fuel in the pipe, and then there is fuel, the offtake from the refineries that have to be added. So it will take a few days to be up and running. But our interagency effort is going to be on it all the way, and let me tell you what that has looked like so far. Starting this weekend, my team began multiple daily calls with Colonial senior executives, Dave Turk leading those, and those calls have enabled us to share information across the federal government to keep us fully in sync with their progress and to let them know what resources we can bring to bear. We've spoken today and yesterday with several governors' offices in the affected areas from the South and the Mid-Atlantic. They're obviously, understandably concerned with reports of gas stations running out of fuel, and they want this pipeline restarted, as do we all. We are going to continue to assess impacts along the East Coast and in particular the parts of the Southeast, using the information and analysis from the Energy Information Agency, which is part of the interagency combined effort, and other federal partners. We're using these conversations and that information to inform the federal decision making with our federal partners around steps to mitigate these supply impacts and disruptions. So on Sunday afternoon, some of you are aware that the Department of Transportation issued an hours of service waiver, which provides greater flexibility to drivers who are transporting gas and diesel and jet fuel across 17 states as well as the District of Columbia. DOT also moved to temporarily relax some of its workforce requirements and monitoring so that we can make sure that we have the personnel online in these places and with the drivers. This morning, the Environmental Protection Agency issued a waiver of the blend of fuels for the affected states to allow us to use non-compliant fuel and boost available supply where it's needed. Further, the Department of Transportation's Federal Rail Administration is working to enlist rail operators in an effort to transport fuel from ports inland to and from, and I spoke as well with Chairman Glick of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission of FERC this morning. He is positioned to issue, FERC is positioned to issue orders quickly to direct the pipeline to prioritize fuel to the areas that are most in need once the pipeline is up and running. So in short, we're looking at every option we have across the federal government and all of the agencies. And in the meantime, I do want to say this, that we expect that gas station owners are and should act responsibly. We will have no tolerance for price gouging. Federal and state officials will be investigating those actions if they see price gouging, and we are urging consumers to report any price gouging to their state attorneys general. And still, I want to be clear that these states who are impacted, even with the turning on of the pipeline system, they still may feel a supply crunch as Colonial fully resumes. So, but the American people can feel assured that this administration is working with the company to get it resumed as soon as possible. And as one other warning, I guess, let me emphasize that much as there was no cause for, say, hoarding toilet paper at the beginning of the pandemic, there should be no cause for hoarding gasoline, especially in light of the fact that the pipeline should be substantially operational by the end of this week and over the weekend. So at the same time, it certainly is a reminder that we need to take a hard look at how we need to harden our necessary infrastructure, and that includes cyber threats. And as Ann Neuberger, who was here yesterday and told you, this administration is taking an all-hands-on-deck approach to enhancing our cyber defenses, and Secretary Mayorkas is here to tell us a bit about what he's doing on that front.
Thank you very much, Secretary Granholm. And let me pick up on something that the Secretary said that I think is very important to emphasize. On Friday, this ransomware attack became public. Saturday morning, the president was briefed and immediately directed an all-of-government effort. And immediately, we executed on the President's direction, the Department of Energy, the Department of Transportation, DOD, in terms of its logistics capabilities, the EPA, and of course the Department of Homeland Security, and others. The direction was to bring our capabilities and our resources to bear, our expertise, and whatever we can do to be poised should any of those capabilities be called upon or be able to deliver much-needed resources. We in the Department of Homeland Security, for example, began working immediately with the Department of Transportation to be ready should any request for a Jones Act waiver be made to us to allow a foreign flagged vessel to deliver fuel should that need arise. And of course, that need is not necessarily yet confirmed, but we wanted to be poised at the President's direction to be ready and to be able to act immediately. The attack that Colonial Pipe suffered is a ransomware attack. That threat of ransomware is certainly by no means new. As a matter of fact, last week I spoke at an event sponsored by the United States Chamber of Commerce about the gravity of the threat. More than $350 million in losses are attributable to ransomware attacks this year. That's a more than 300% increase over last year's victimization of companies, and there's no company too small to suffer a ransomware attack. We are seeing increasingly small and medium-sized businesses suffer a ransomware attack, and we are bringing in the Department of Homeland Security our capabilities to bear through the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA as it is commonly known. We are in the lead in the public-private partnership in an all-of-government effort to raise the cyber hygiene of private industry and, of course, within the federal .gov environment as well. We share information between the public and private sectors. We share best practices. We have cybersecurity directors to actually be on site at a company's facilities to assess it, to make recommendations, and to direct it with respect to voluntarily direct it to raise its cyber hygiene and how it can best do so. This threat is not imminent. It is upon us. The Colonial Pipe ransomware attack is a stark example of what we have been saying for some time now. And quite frankly, when I served as the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security in the second term of the Obama-Biden administration, we were focused on it then. And so we are bringing our all-of-government effort at the President's direction to not only address the situation that is upon us today, that is galvanizing our attention, of course, but to really focus on critical infrastructure and what we can do to strengthen that critical infrastructure across our government and to make it more resilient to these types of attacks and to raise awareness so that everyone understands the need to prevent and be in a position to respond to these attacks. And I'll turn it over. Jen.
And I'll just say we may pull up our Deputy Secretary here too in case we need him. Go ahead, Peter.
Secretary Mayorkas, I'll follow up on what you just said a moment ago. The FERC chairman, to whom the Secretary referred to a moment ago, said yesterday there should be mandatory cybersecurity standards for pipelines. Do you agree, and is this administration going to try to put those in place?
So our conversations within the administration are ongoing and have been underway with respect to what measures we need to take, both administratively and, of course, in a companion effort, the legislature to see how we can raise the cyber hygiene across the country.
Peter.
On a separate issue, Secretary Mayorkas, we have cameras today in Texas that are showing humongous groups of dozens or hundreds of migrants walking right into the country. So I'm curious what you meant last week when you said the border is closed.
What I meant is precisely that. The border is closed. We are expelling single adults and families under the Title 42 authority that rests with the Center for Disease Control. And We decided as an administration, furtherance of the president's direction to administer our immigration laws of this country in an orderly and safe and humane way, that we will not expel unaccompanied children.
Mary. Secretary Granholm, you just acknowledged the possibility of a supply crunch. Can you give us a bit more of a reality check here? What kinds of shortages should Americans be bracing for? What kind of disruption on gas prices can Americans expect?
First, let me just be really clear. The crunch is in the areas that are affected by the pipeline, the main spurs of the pipeline. So that really is the southeast. It's about 70% of the supplies of North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and especially Southern Virginia are impacted the most. And so those are the areas that we have the greatest concerns with. And because of the fact that there's not a whole lot of other supply. Now, this particular pipeline also supplies other states, but there are other pipelines that supply other states as well, so there's more diversity. In this particular region, that's where we're going to see the crunch, and this is why we know that we have gasoline, we just have to get it to the right places. And that's why these next couple of days, I think, will be challenging, and we want to encourage people. It's not that we have a gasoline shortage. It's that we have this supply crunch, and that things will be back to normal soon, and that we're asking people not to hoard and know that we are all over this.
Amr.
Thanks. What does this say about the fragility of our national infrastructure, that one hack could do this, and could have been worse if the hackers had gotten into the operational system?
Attacks on our critical infrastructure are not new. There are different levels of strength and resilience across the critical infrastructure enterprise, and that is why we are so focused on making sure that the cyber hygiene across the entire enterprise is strengthened. And remember, in cybersecurity, one is only as strong as one's weakest link, and therefore we are indeed focused on identifying those weak links, working with those weak links in the critical infrastructure enterprise, as well as throughout the private sector, and strengthening our country as a whole. This is not unique to the United States.
Thanks, John. Secretary Granholm, can you give us a sense of the timeline on the Jones Act waiver that we just heard from the DOT about, and when will it go into effect?
Actually, this is the Jones Act waiver guy.
Yeah. So if I may, when we receive a request for a waiver, the Department of Transportation engages in an analysis to determine whether any U.S. flagged vessels are available to deliver what is needed. And if in fact they are, then of course they are called upon under the Jones Act statute to deliver accordingly. But if there are not U.S. flags available, then we analyze the need for foreign flag vessels and apply the statutory requirements correctly. And of course, in a situation such as this, the work we already began precisely for this reason at the President's direction, to be ready and to be responsive with the urgency that the situation would require. So we are on it as fast as possible.
Is there a timeline, Secretary? I know you're conducting a review, but what is the timeline?
So we're going to move in lightning speed.
Matt Visor.
I had a question for Secretary Granholm on behalf of a colleague who couldn't be here. Not about the Colonial Pipeline, but a different one. The state of Michigan has ordered the closure of a pipeline called Line 5 with a deadline tomorrow. The question is, has the White House or the Biden administration or the former governor of Michigan, current Secretary Granholm, if there's any position on the Line 5, if you guys are urging the state of Michigan to do anything one way or the other?
Yeah, we don't weigh in on that, and it's in court right now. So that's where it sits. It will be decided in court.
Go ahead.
Can you tell us what is the feasibility of using rail cars to transport fuel into the affected areas? I know that's being looked at.
Yeah, the DOT is looking at that, and so we'll have to wait till their analysis is done. These are not easy solutions because There may or may not be the right rail cars. There may not or may not be the deep water ports available for the Jones Act to be able to respond. So this particular area of the country, this is why we have doubled down on ensuring that there's an ability to truck oil in, gas in. But the pipe is the best way to go, and so that's why hopefully this company, Colonial, will in fact be able to restore operations by the end of the week, as they have said.
I'm going to do the last one in the back.
Yeah, I actually have a question for each of you. I'll start with you, Secretary Granholm, because ladies first. Obviously, we have the acute issues with the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack, but looking more holistically in a macro view, how does this speed up the efforts at DOE to move in more of a renewable direction, since this is going to have an impact on people at the pump?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously are all in on making sure that we meet the president's goals of getting to 100% clean electricity by 2035 and net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And, if you drive an electric car, this would not be affecting you, clearly. But I don't want to, this company is acting in a responsible way. They took their pipeline down so that the ransomware would not spread. And so up to this point, they're carefully reviewing so that they're doing this in a responsible way. The broader issue is a very important issue. It's an issue for the president's priority in the American Jobs Plan, the issue of investing in a transmission grid, for example, so that you don't have the cyber issues associated with it. So there's a lot of broader questions in this, and we hope that we'll be able to see that investment in infrastructure that will facilitate clean and renewable energy.
Secretary Mayorkas, for you, are you having any issues filling some of these critical infrastructure jobs? I know this has been sort of a historic problem in finding people who are qualified to take on mass-scale cybersecurity for the federal government. That's a huge undertaking. Are you still having some of the issues that we've seen sort of on and off throughout history, really in the history of DHS, filling those positions with qualified applicants?
So it's a very interesting question. So let me say, we launched this series of cybersecurity sprints several weeks ago. Our first cybersecurity sprint was on ransomware, precisely because of the threat, the gravity of the threat that poses. Our second sprint is precisely on recruiting and retaining top cybersecurity talent. Bless you. Top talent, and we're very focused on that, and we're very focused on also achieving one of the president's critical directives to reflect a critical value, which is that our cybersecurity talent will achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thanks.
Thank you both.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.